All right, welcome to Strider Tree Gear. Today in this tips and tricks video, I just want to demonstrate the basic formula for removing trees, sort of single spar trees, a lot of conifers, when you've got a little bit of space, but you can't fall it all the way whole. Kind of the standard, appropriately double tied in all the way up, cutting branches as you go, taking a little top, rigging it out, and then chunking down from there. And hopefully you'll find this useful and interesting, and you guys can climb safe, do good tree work out there. Thanks for joining me. Here we go. So this is the basic setup if you're going to do a spar. You need two things. You need your work positioning lanyard. I highly recommend a steel core lanyard if you're starting off. This tends to be in closest proximity to any cutting that's being done. I've been doing this a long time, gone years without hitting my lanyard. I like the ropes. Next, you also need a choked off secondary tying point. If you guys are using a double rope system, then you need something like the Buckingham tree squeeze, which I hope to demonstrate at a later date. But if you're using single rope, here I've got the akimbo. If you've got a rope runner, if you've got the chicane and Petzl zigzag, any of those will work. And you need appropriately choked off to the tree so that if I were to fall, or if this were to drop and I were to gaff out, this is still gonna catch me. At no point am I in danger of actually falling any distance as long as I maintain these two tie-in points. So that's the main thing. I'm going to maintain these as I go up, which means I have to flip my rope. I got to take a little bit of time, bring some slack into this, and advance it as well as I'm climbing. So I'll show you a little bit of my routine right now. I'm going to gaff in, going to flip up, going to advance that, and I keep this underneath my other climb line, or my positioning line. Going to go up, and I'll choke that off, make sure my slack is good. Go up a little bit more. And now I'm at my first branches. So I'll leave this a little bit lower when I pull out the saw for cutting. But when you're doing a spar, this is the next step. Two hands, safety, got my ears. Here we go. And I'm gonna come around here so I don't risk hitting my lanyard. Now I left a little bit of a nub right there because I didn't want to get too close to my lanyard, which is right underneath it. You really don't want to leave big nubs because they get in the way of any rigging that you're gonna do. They catch pieces as they fall. It's very annoying. And I've got this choked off tying point anyway, so I don't need to worry about having a branch for my line to be over. If you're double roping, then you do want to leave more. A lot of times you'll want to leave a branch so that you can have your rope around it unless you're using a tree squeeze. So here we go, upwards we go, more cutting to come. So still just working our way up this tree. Sometimes I'll advance my flip line over a couple of branches and then I'll cut them below. Obviously I'm trying really hard not to hit this line, and I'll cut very carefully with my chainsaw and control it very precisely, two hands, in order to avoid that. But I know I've still got this as a backup, and that's why I feel okay cutting like this. A lot of times I'll do that. I'll cut most of the way through, and then I'll toss it. I can do the same thing over here. Most of the way through, and now if I'm trying to avoid hitting something, I can toss it. I'll cut everything I can reach before I go to move again. Notice when I follow through, I move the saw away from me and away from my climb gear, away from the tree. Sometimes branches will tend to push it back in, and that's where you end up nicking things. All right, up we go. If you look and listen carefully, you'll be able to see that I'm actually hitting the chain brake in between every time I move positions. So I'll make a cut, and then I'll hit that and put it away before I start moving again, just in case something gets bumped. You know, and if you don't have an electric saw, you got a gas saw, it sits there and idles. If you don't hit that chain brake, a branch can catch that trigger down in there and get it to go off and end up cutting something. So it's a good habit to get into. Use that chain brake. So now that I've made it to the top of the height that I need to take a top at, a lot of times if I can climb high enough to where I could just take a small top, as long as I've got a little bit of space below me. Even if I can't follow the whole tree, usually there's enough space around to just take it. In this case, I've got a trailer down there, we've got a little car I don't want to hit, so we're gonna actually negatively rig the top out to avoid any issues. Hey Josh, you don't need to put tension on that just yet. I'm actually not tied on. So once I'm at the height I want to be, I pick, there's a variety of methods you can use, and we'll have some videos on that later. But for this one, I'm just going to use a rigging ring, and I'm going to route my rope through the rigging ring above my tie-in point. Above into the wood that I'm going to try and catch. But I'm going to cut a face cut first, so that I don't accidentally nick the rope while I'm cutting. So that's what's going to happen next. Cut a little face cut. I'll route the rope, tie it off, and then we'll be ready to take the top. So here we go. Face cut here. Perfect. That. We got slack on this rope. I'm gonna make sure it's routed in such a way that it's not gonna interfere with my climb line, because that's a good way to melt right through your climb line, is if your rigging line has to rub along it while it's under tension. So you don't want that. Route it through the ring. Gonna go up, tie a quick running bowline. There is much debate about what's the best knot to use for this scenario. I sure like the running bowline. 90% of the time, that's what I'm gonna use. All right, so now the rope is right there where the hinge is, so I'm not gonna be worried about cutting it. I've got one more little branch I'm gonna cut out of the way, and I'll make my back cut. And first I'm gonna talk to the groundy. All right, Josh, we're hooked up. That looks like a one wrapper. It's important to know roughly how much weight you're taking versus how many wraps on the porta wrap. The more wraps, obviously, the more friction, the harder it's gonna catch. A rope on a top like this, I want it to catch slowly. The faster this thing stops, the more shock I experience and the tree experiences and the rope and the gear and all of it. So the more gradually we can slow it down, the better. And that's a matter of having a good groundy down there. If you see, Josh is pulling out some slack behind him so that he doesn't have to worry. It's gonna make it a little easier on his hands to have the slack behind him. He's setting himself up so he's out of the way of the top coming down, but he's still visible. I'm gonna give him the signal. Josh, are you ready? Yeah. All righty, and we'll be set up. All right, we're gonna let this one run and catch it nice and slow. Here we go. Get that out of the way. Here it goes. Beautiful. Nice and slow. If you look here, this tree's hardly shaking. It was a very gradual, comfortable catch of what is actually a fairly significantly sized top. I'd like to point out we also cleared the trailer, and Josh is doing a great job down there dragging it out while still supporting some of the weight on the rope. That's what it's like to have a good groundy. So after I've got the top of this tree out, now I realize I've got enough space below me to be able to push chunks and to cut small branches. So the way I'm gonna finish this tree is just chunking it in either doubles or triples, which is sort of tree guys speak for 2 or 3 firewood lengths, roughly 36 inches or so, give or take. Basically, they're small enough pieces that I can control them and pick where they're gonna land, but big enough that I can get down, sometime in the next hour. I'd also like to point out that the way I have my rope set up right now is kind of the ideal setup for when you're taking the top. I should have explained this before. You want your lanyard over the top of the rigging. So this starts out up here and drops down, but when the lanyard's over the top of the rigging, there is some risk of things getting whipped around and my lanyard getting flicked over the top of the tree, which obviously you don't want. So I have my secondary choked off tying line below the rigging. So even if something goes wrong and things get stuck and trapped, I can still belay out on this rope and I'll have some safety factor. I'm not worried about getting trapped at all, because once the top falls out, I can undo my lanyard and I will be able to belay no matter how things land. So it's the best of both worlds. So after we've taken the top out of this thing, whether you rig it out or drop it, most of the time what I'm gonna do at this point on a vertical spar is take chunks, like I was talking before, doubles, triples, whatever I can comfortably control and land in the spot that's designated. So what I'm gonna demonstrate here is a couple of snap cuts, where I overlap my cuts and then I put the saw away and break it. Another cut I wanna show you is where, as long as you're nice and vertical, I can actually push the saw straight through the cut, saddle it, and generally this will stay right on top. So we're gonna go with one of those here first. Get myself positioned. Once again, my 2 tie-in points, ear and eye protection. Got my 550 here, which is my favorite kind of saw. Hit that chain brake. Come over here, pop that free. I got my little spot right there. Drop it. Easy. Next one. Second one. So I overlapped each of those about 1 inch, and that's usually about right. A little snappy snap, and away we go. Let's get one more there. Lower that, drop this down. Keeping both my ties nice and secure. Generally, I'll try and stay on the back side of a leaning spar, a little more comfortable, but this will work. Snap, snap. Boom, same spot. Now I want to demonstrate a little bit of a different technique that involves, it's a little bit simpler, a little bit faster. When I'm not as worried about having to have perfect control, I'll just push the saw straight through, saddle it, throw the piece off. So we're gonna do that with our next one here. As long as the spar is nice and vertical, that's an easy way to go. Now, so long as the spar is fairly vertical, that works really well. And then you will have completed your first basic spar removal. That'll get you a long way. Hopefully you found that interesting and informative. If there's any other tutorials and things you want to see, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to check those out, and I usually get back to folks if they've got questions. Thanks for joining me here on Strider Tree Gear, and I'll catch you next time.